Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the very important Foreign Office briefing that took place in the morning. We'll be talking to our correspondent Shabbir Wagra for that. Besides that, we'll be talking about the Taliban, who are now ready for a second round of talks with the US. That's going to be our second topic. We'll talk about that in some detail. And the third topic for our conversation is that Russia has started the biggest war games since the Soviet fall near the Chinese border, and China is also participating in these war games. We'll be talking about that in some detail as well. Before we begin the conversation, let me introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for the conversation today, we have Burhanul Islam Saab, former ambassador, and joining him, we have Major Retired S.M. Bashir Saab. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. But before I come to our conversation, sir, I need to speak to our correspondent, Shabbir Wagra, regarding the all-important briefing that took place in the Foreign Office. Shabbir, are you there with us? We're trying to get in touch with our correspondent, Shabbir Wagra. Is he there with us now?
Yes, Waqas, I am.
Shabbir, please tell us what happened at the Foreign Office, what was the briefing about, and especially Pakistan rejecting the baseless allegations leveled against Pakistan in the Indo-US joint statement, if you could shed some light on that.
Yes, Waqas, today's major news out of weekly briefing is regarding this particular rejection of allegations leveled on Pakistan during the recent visit of Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State, Pompeo's visit to India, where he has they issued a giant stakeout statement that with India, and that leveled very serious allegations on Pakistan, and for that, spokesperson categorically said that Pakistan rejects those allegations, and he also regretted that during a bilateral stakeout of two countries, a third country has been mentioned in a negative way, which is not good for the relationship. When this is not a multilateral forum, so they should have not mentioned the third country. It is against the diplomatic norms as well. He also regretted that despite of the fact that U.S. Secretary of State during his visit to Pakistan, before that visit he took to India, he has been briefed about Indian violations, ceasefire violations, and also Indian atrocities and human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir. But regretfully, these two things have not been mentioned in the joint stakeout. He also said that while they mentioned about the Mumbai attacks, but the trial of the Mumbai attacks is underway in Pakistani courts, and they should respect the Pakistani courts and Pakistani judicial procedure, which is underway. And he also mentioned that other allegations which have been leveled are totally baseless, and he said that Pakistan not only rejects them, but also Pakistan has conveyed its reservations to the United States through diplomatic channels as well.
And there was no mention made of the state terrorism of India on the Kashmiri people, which results in humanitarian emergency. No conversation took place regarding that. There was no statement by the US on that issue. Any comments regarding that from the Foreign Office?
Yes, Waqas, the Foreign Office spokesperson categorically said that it is regrettable that despite of the fact that U.S. Secretary of State has been briefed about Indian atrocities in the occupied Kashmir, especially recently India has escalated killing of innocent Kashmiris, escalated violence in Indian occupied Kashmir, and also trying to change the demographic parameters of Indian occupied Kashmir, and especially as he mentioned in his briefing that only during last 1 week, 14 innocent Kashmiris have been martyred by Indian forces in different areas of Indian occupied Kashmir. So, despite of all these briefings and information given to the U.S. Secretary of State, but there was no mention of any single word in the joint stakeout. So that is also Pakistan regretted on this oversight which has been done by U.S. Secretary of State during his visit.
And one last question, Shabbir, was there any mention of CPEC, and was any statement regarding CPEC made at the Foreign Office briefing?
Yes, Waqas, there was a question regarding recent rumors and propaganda which is going on against CPEC, especially with reference to certain misquoting of certain officials of new government that government is considering to renegotiate CPEC. He said he categorically rejected and said these rumors. He said these are all news are based on rumors. There's no such option or there is no such any suggestion going on between in the new government. During the visit of Foreign Minister of China, both the countries, the Pakistani Foreign Minister and Chinese Foreign Minister, reiterated that CPEC is one of the major projects and top priority of this government. So there's no question about any renegotiation or any stoppage of on any of the CPEC projects. Even during, if I tell you the joint press briefing of Pakistani Foreign Minister after Chinese Foreign Minister, he mentioned that during the joint press briefing, Pakistani Foreign Minister and Chinese Foreign Minister both mentioned that they reiterated that CPEC would be the priority of both the governments.
All right, thank you very much for the detailed update. Our correspondent Shabbir Wagra reporting on the Foreign Office briefing that took place this morning. Seems like the Foreign Office had quite a full plate today, sir. And since it is your domain, sir, is it the norm that when some joint statements are made by countries, specifically a third country is targeted in their statements? Is that something that is diplomatically acceptable, sir?
It is not normal, but it happens because, you know, the sensitivity of relations between Pakistan, India and Pakistan, US at this stage, and the particular closeness that we see between India and USA. So it is of interest to the media. So when they ask questions, the spokesperson, of course, normally do comment on those. Very much of interest to Pakistan are the issues covered in that, and India-US relations we see particularly. In a way, matter of concern that they bring in Pakistan in one context. They also talk about Pakistan-China relations and all that. So spokesperson rightly made comments saying that Pakistan's interest, Pakistan will pursue in every possible way, and whatever they say, exaggerated comments and statements, we do reject whenever they make such. For example, about the CPEC China thing, some comments came, and also they spoke about American and Taliban and other issues also. And what are the specific things, some issues I couldn't follow in that?
Sir, we're talking about statements regarding CPEC because there's, as you mentioned, there's been quite a lot of controversy that was drummed up about that. Let's bring that question to Ehsan Saab. Ehsan Saab, talking about that controversy that was blown out of proportion and comments made or stated out of context, do you see that there is a conspiracy afoot to damage CPEC, and all these international media organizations are also part of that conspiracy, since we see these articles appearing in most Western media outlets, sir?
Yes, of course, Waqas. This is very, very clear and evident from the kind of things which is happening, because this CPEC is basically a troublesome thing which has come in this region. And within this region, then once it comes to Pakistan, then obviously it disturbs so many. One is in our absolute neighborhood, like Mr. Saab was also saying, and that is India, which is not very happy. They were trying to commission Chabahar, and they could not actually digest this, that CPEC, which is passing through all along Pakistan, right from north and ending up in south, is going to get all kinds of communication infrastructure built up, and movement of the trade on that route, and ultimately ending at Gwadar, which is by naturally, which has an advantage of being the deepest seaport in this area. So that was actually, and the international narrative, which basically has changed from geopolitics to geoeconomics now. Now it is no more that kind of warfare is in this era is basically the economic warfare. So that economic warfare, where who suits and where, it is very, very clear. Economy, India is a bigger country. No doubt it is acceptable. Yes, of course, they are bigger in terms of, area-wise and in terms of population and all that. They have bigger economy also. But at the same time, Pakistan is also not a small country now. Pakistan is a nuclear country. It's a big country now. It's a stable country. It's an internal stability Pakistan has brought in through controlling this menace of war on terrorism, which Pakistan has fought, has disturbed so many rivals of Pakistan on these accounts. Pakistan, that's why keep saying that. So they are trying to, basic aim of US in this area is not only from point of view of Afghanistan and fighting 17 years of war and with no results till today. It's not only that they are here for that. They are here for containment, for which I am trying to talk about, and that is the economic containment. Economy is being threatened. They are presently the biggest economy in the world. The only country which is threatening their economy in times to come is China. And China is having favorable relations with Pakistan, and China is totally depending on Pakistan. And Pakistan, of course, is also depending on China, because Pakistan and China have got very good relations, and they will keep going on. And that is not only, it's not only a lip service that we say that we have got our friendships higher than Himalayas and deeper than
Iron
the
brothers,
ocean,
sir.
Iron brothers and everything. So people would like to definitely create these gaps, and these they would like to exploit on anything which is left loose. Now here is a point where again I would like to make that Pakistan has to be also very careful. They need to be very careful on all that, because if we know it, or actually already we know it, that we are encircled by the conspiracy of our enemies, and they would like to disturb this whole thing, and this is not likely to happen. This is likely to happen. So why we are not careful also?
Right, sir.
We need to be also careful whatever we say, wherever we try to do, whatever impression we try to even give, for that matter. Small little acts will be blown out of proportion by our enemies, and they're not going to leave any stone unturned to do it, and they should do it, because if they are enemies, if I am given a chance to blow something which comes to my hand, regarding my enemy India, I'm going to do it.
Right,
Am
sir.
I not going to do it? So why should we do it? So the first thing is that we need to put our house also in order to some extent, and we need to be careful on that account. And secondly, we should be very much aware of what our enemies are conspiring, and we need to have a counter narrative out there.
Absolutely, and that's very important, sir. And on that note, we're going to take a short break. We'll return very quickly. Stay with us.
Basic education is the right of every child. Today, some 168 million children are in child labor, deprived of education. Every child, without discrimination, deserves
Welcome back after the break. We're in conversation with Burhanul Islam Saab and Ehsan Bashir Saab. Thank you very much, sir. Let's continue with our conversation, sir. Some good news finally emanating that Pakistan has been harping on for the past many years. The Taliban are now ready for a second round of talks with the US, possibly this month, and it is likely to focus on prisoner exchanges this time, confidence building measures, and ways to move from backdoor meetings to formal negotiations. That is something very positive that we are hearing about, sir. What is your opinion on the matter going forward? Do you think that this will be something with a results-oriented approach, or do you think it's going to be the same old lip service that we've been hearing with no results?
Indeed, positive developments, which we all have reasons to celebrate in a way that we have been talking in your programs also in the past, that there is no way of finding a lasting solution in Afghanistan without the Taliban being recognized as a credible and important
Stakeholder and political
in
force.
Afghanistan.
Yes.
Political force, military force, and in every sense of the word of a party to the conflict. Now, the Americans were trying to suggest that, oh, let the Taliban talk to the Afghan government
yes,
in
sir.
Kabul and sort out first. Taliban, I think, rightly took a stance that it would not be useful because it, as a matter of principle, it doesn't recognize Taliban as a legitimate authority in Afghanistan. So they insisted that we should talk to the Americans first to size up, find out as to what the Americans want, what is their long-term interest in Afghanistan, why after 17 years they are still not talking about the possibility of leaving Afghanistan or not giving a time schedule and time frame for their departure from Afghanistan. So they have been talking about these things, and in last summer, in the beginning of summer, you remember,
The first meeting took place.
First meeting took place, and before that also the signals were sent from both sides, the possibility of direct talks. And now I think the July talks were very important, as you pointed out, 3 positive developments in right direction. I think this is how the parties will be able to work out a possible course of action in terms of leading the dialogue to a direct talks from backdoor talks. I think it is in the realm of possibility now. The Taliban will be talking with the Americans, and then eventually an intra-Afghan dialogue will start, where Taliban's position will be recognized, their basic demands will be accepted in a way, like the release of their prisoners and recognition of their office formally, and their position in the future political structure and framework of Afghanistan. I see these as positive developments because without Taliban being active and a lot of pressure in the past on Pakistan, if you recall that Pakistan should help these parties to sit together, I think it is some sort of Pakistan's victory also that it continued to insist that Taliban's desire should be taken note of, and they want to talk to the Americans to find out, because their first point always had been that American force and NATO should withdraw from Afghanistan. So all these things you cannot, and without not talking about withdrawal, you insist that the intra-Afghan dialogue starts. It looked as a non-starter.
Sure.
So I now feel personally that I think it is sort of a positive development, if not a breakthrough. And these parties now, while talking about further details, as you indicated that they will talk in the next meeting, Taliban are expecting that a date will be conveyed for meeting in second round. Date hasn't come, but in September they are saying.
Yes, sir. They're still waiting for the time and place
the
Americans are going to decide.
Most likely in Qatar, but I think we are supporting. Pakistan should take little credit, whatever it is, because Americans and the West had been insisting that Pakistan should help. Even the Afghan government had been saying, help us find a way to meet and sort out our initial difficulties. I think they are now talking about the agenda for meeting.
So it's baby steps, sir. And I think that is the best thing about this entire process, that at least it has started. And that is one thing which we can say is a victory of sorts for the Afghan people and also for regional peace.
And those who wanted a negotiated solution in Afghanistan, not military solution, which America initially had been insisting.
Absolutely, sir. Essence of, when we're talking about the engagement of the US with the Taliban, we are also talking about the future role of NATO and America in the region. How do you foresee those talks going forward, sir? What do you think would be the give and take or negotiating points when they sit down for that conversation?
Because we see that, we say that, of course, it is a very welcome thing that these talks should begin and then it should happen. But then to my mind, I have a different angle to see it as well, that I feel that it is no more than a cosmetic things which is going on, because there is no concrete thing into it. By releasing few or couple of prisoners out there will not resolve this long outstanding issue, which is very, very complex in Afghanistan, where so many things are involved into it, where the
And it's not
Indians are
just
given a greater role, and bringing in, on one end you are agreeing to what Pakistan solution was there, and Afghan Taliban are being brought to onto a table for discussion and all that. On the other hand, you are not giving something concrete. Why are you not overall going for a truce? Why not you for a peace truce totally? Because summer is getting over. It's already September, and in winters, otherwise also the operation gets very difficult in Afghanistan in that area. So it gets halted, and the stature and wherever the troops are, they get stationed out there, and then they get reimbursed, and they get refurbished their things, and then they're ready for the onslaught of another
The
summer,
spring,
spring and
offensive.
summer thing is coming up there. I want to suggest here is that if some party is really very honest in having it done, and truly they want to do it, then there should have been some very concrete thing into it, which is being put onto the table for a talk. Because if you are saying we are trying to talk to you, we are trying to negotiate with you, we will give you something, and we will ask you to do something, to withdraw from some places, withdraw your stances on something and all that. On the other hand, you're bringing in India there, you're trying to give them a greater role in Afghanistan. You're trying to say we are going to talk to you directly, we are going to negotiate with each other only, it's only us doing it. I think it's just cosmetic, nothing more than that, and they're trying to gain a bit of more time, because they are already into a very big fix, where the American troops and the NATO for these 17 years have seen that they can't really win this war without engaging Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, definitely Taliban in Afghan owned solution is the solution, and that is where the reality is. Well, you need to ask them in totality what they want. You can't really sit on there, because this will be again a fruitless effort, I would say, in times to come. However, the efforts should be made. I'm not trying to say that there should be no efforts at all, but there should be an efforts, but then with very, very solid thing onto it, because it's enough in this region that what we have seen.
Sir, from where we have been, I think it is still a very welcome step, or a welcome piece of news, that there is an engagement taking place finally, and that the Americans have finally listened.
Sir, for how long we will keep sitting with
It doesn't matter, sir, at least
with this thing only, that we have made a little bit of, we already made this. No, this progress was made much before. This is not something, there's nothing new into it. I don't see anything new into it. These are those solutions which were, basically given a couple of years back.
Yes, sir, but there was no action taken on those solutions. The new thing is that
yes, you're trying to again come with the same thing. So that is where the thing is, that you need to be serious. You need to be. Now the time is fastly is passing, and they must understand people are in this region want a solution to it. Now, because of the presence of Chinese and the Russians and the others, and America knows about it, that they are getting irrelevant in this region. They are also in a hurry to do something now, but they are not putting still anything concrete onto it. 17 consulates working in India, doing nothing else but except to damage the Pakistan-Afghan relations. Nothing else. Their agenda is nothing else. Right. And on the other hand, they say that yes, they have since they have invested such a huge amount in Afghanistan, that's why their presence is important in Afghanistan. Well, that's the reason they give.
I think that's a separate topic though, sir. That's a completely
no, but this is very much relevant to this thing.
When we talk about the baby steps or the confidence building measures that now we are witnessing after 17 years of pointless war, sir, I think they should be welcomed. And it's not just the Afghan Taliban prisoners that are going to be released by the US, because it's a reciprocal arrangement where there are a number of prisoners that the Taliban have also taken, American citizens that are prisoners with the Taliban. So, and a prisoner exchange program.
If I remember correctly, we were hearing that Guantanamo Bay will be closed.
That's right,
and
sir.
it's still operational.
Absolutely.
So the things are there on the ground.
So we have to take everything with a pinch of salt. Well, very, very, very true, sir. So let's move forward. And Burhan Sahab, in your opinion, when we talk about the security promises that the International Committee of Red Cross and other such organizations that were working in Afghanistan were given to them by the Taliban have now been revoked because the Taliban are not happy with the performance of these organizations that are supposed to do humanitarian work in Afghanistan. And they've also offered a stark warning to other organizations other than the ICRC that they will meet the same fate if they do not discharge their duties diligently and professionally. How do you view this particular statement that, or warning rather, that the Taliban have issued?
You see, in war ground, you see the parties taking strong stance on any issue. Taliban have genuine grievances that their prisoners were not treated in terms of the international agreements and documents and ICRC has a responsibility to take care of their prisoners, access to their prisoners and all those things. They haven't fulfilled their general commitment in terms of the obligations in terms of these treaties, global treaties. So Taliban got frustrated and now started giving threats. Now in a war situation, this is normal behavior of a party which is being sort of not given proper respect and their prisoners are, anywhere in the world, any war, ICRC has a responsibility to take care of the, the prisoners as a first and foremost responsibility. So they are failing to do it, but my opinion will be to find a negotiated way out solution instead of threatening to target them. Because this is a humanitarian organization trying to help the warring factions to deal with the humanitarian side of a conflict. I mean, the prisoners are the outcome or of a war, violence on a ground. But in such a situation, certain mistakes might have been committed by ICRC, but that doesn't mean that you take a hostile stance against them and threat them to target. I think it's not a fair thing, but in a war, everything is, justified.
Fair in love and war.
In both
Absolutely,
situations.
sir. But the question, sir, is that maybe the Taliban are also using this as political leverage when we're talking about the backdrop of this situation where the Americans and the Afghan Taliban are probably engaging in a conversation. This is a form of pressure tactics that they're using in order to assert their presence within Afghanistan and their presence on the battlefield.
I agree with you, because when you are on the verge of some sort of breakthrough or starting of a negotiation process, you try to gather mileage in whichever way is possible to be able to influence the negotiation process. Some on the humanitarian ground, some on military grounds. You will try, as you were discussing earlier also, that military offensive, both sides will try to gather maximum mileage on the war field and such humanitarian situation to be able to put those on table while negotiations take place. So it's right, it's normal course.
As do you think that this would be an effective tactic that the Taliban can use, that international NGOs such as the IRC and others, Red Cross, many others that are working there for humanitarian causes, will also be under threat? And do you think that can be used as leverage by the Taliban against the US in the conversation?
I think they can make use of that. Yes, of course they can. They can have that, and they can ask them to come in front and plead their case in that way, if I see. But as I am of the view is, I have a very different view of all this. This is not happening. It hasn't. This situation has not developed overnight. There is a history to it. And repeatedly we have seen that we have gone very close to certain kind of solutions and then we backfire. So that is what makes the whole thing debatable.
The trust deficit still exists.
Absolutely, trust deficit is there, because whenever there is a situation which develops that yes, there is some solution which is going to be out there and it is very close to achieve, suddenly some sabotage activity or some kind of that happens in the best interest of those players, those who are out there, those who want to stay out there, and they do it themselves. And then they try to put the blame on some other shoulders and all that and get away with that. Now that should not happen now in Afghanistan, because the time has gone. it is a very long war which has taken place. All these humanitarian industry, I would say, of the world has been there in this area, especially in this area. The human genocide which you were mentioning earlier also, which is happening in Kashmir, is happening in front of their eyes. Well, they are totally mum and quiet on that, and they are not talking about that. The lib service, and there is a lecture, there is a seminar, there is a conference, and all that. They are not serious.
Let me add this, sir. The US has also requested for a 2-month ceasefire to allow the parliamentary elections to take place next month in Kabul. And they're also wondering or thinking about or considering that a visit by Taliban officials to prisoners in government custody may also be allowed. So how do you view that,
Why
sir?
not the other way around? Why not the other way around? They should say, first we will have the peace, and only then we will have the elections. First we will resolve the issues with the Taliban. Let's accept them. Let them bring them into the mainframe, and then have these elections,
let
and
them
then they
also
will be
be
meaningful.
let
And
them
then the
also
regime which
participate.
comes in Kabul, then after that result of that, the regime which will come in Kabul will be a meaningful regime.
Right.
That will be the regime which will rule now,
So the
which
Taliban-
is ruling. The present Kabul regime is ruling 35% of the area.
Absolutely.
And the rest is that. So which is more important, Waqas?
Absolutely,
Which is more?
sir.
So that makes the whole thing very suspectable, that either they're not very clear in their own statements. So what is the intention?
In an ideal world, the Afghan Taliban would be participating in the elections that are supposed to take place next month. And
That is what they want to do.
that's what we hope that will
That
be
is what the time and space is. They
the
want
end.
to gain some more time.
All right, sir. Let's move on to our second topic, sir, or rather our third topic, and that is about Russia starting the biggest war games since the fall of the Soviet Union, sir. What is the message here? What are they trying to convey to the outside world when these exercises are being conducted?
It's a very strong message, I will say, the Russia and China are trying to convey to the United States. This is, the Americans were having relatively better relations with both these countries during last, I should say, in last 10 years, I should say 10 to 5 years. But a lot of important developments took place which hindered the process of them going closer or giving a feeling of maintaining good relations. I think these Americans, the Russian adventure in Ukraine in 2014 disturbed the whole process. It has been targeted by the West. Europe and America, they do not think that Russia has done a good thing in terms of action in international politics. It has disturbed the otherwise peaceful environment in Europe that they were building over the last 10, 20 years. So Russia targeted there. America had been pursuing the policy of pivot to Asia, where they thought that China and Russia are the targets, the enemies there. So they were, Americans till recently were trying to target China and Russia, and they of course would now try to get back to the process in which they are trying to come closer. So the Americans now feel that it's a disaster they have committed. In politics, these sort of messages you pursue. It doesn't mean that they are going to a breaking point, but I think these messagings are important. American wants to say that, the Russians wants to say that we are no more to be considered as friends of Europe and Russia in terms of pursuing politics of the region and globe. And also, China is trying to say that with trade war and other developments taking place, that we have alternatives. We know how to live, how to pursue our own foreign policy, and also to pursue our interests. They feel that in the backdrop of Europe and America trying to corner Russia and China, they think that we should forge strong relations between ourselves, not only political but also military. This is how we'll be telling the world outside that we are strong countries. We know how to survive, how to deal with your negative messages or threats. Our national interest is what we should pursue, and I mean, it's involving 300,000 troops and 1,000 aircraft. As you mentioned, it's first time after the.
Not only that, sir, these exercises are also taking place while President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping are in the Russian port city of Vladivostok.
It was planned in such a way that they should
sir.
be here.
And this is interesting because relations between Moscow and Beijing have not been very of the best nature. If you recall, there have been many concerns in Russian circles about Chinese ascendancy and in the eastern areas of Russia, the Chinese influence which is rising, so they were concerned about that. But suddenly when we saw after the Crimean situation, Russia being made a pariah by the West, has the option of now joining hands with China. Do you see that this particular friendship or new relationship which is developing between China and Russia will be a formidable foe for the West, sir?
Yes, I think so. And at the same time, this is very fortunate and this is very good omen for this region, because this region also has been neglected and it has been a war theater for such a long time. The only thing is that if these regional powers, whenever we say that the regional powers have a role to play, and then the smaller countries' or interests also can only be looked after if the regional cohesion is out there. And the regional cohesion can only be seen if Russia and China, they are closer to each other. And they have their issues resolved, though there may be certain small issues. I would go a step ahead on that. I would say that India should also learn a lesson from this as well. India is also not a very small country in this region. India has a role to play in this region. But what India is trying to do is that India is trying to play victim to the outside world more than the regional dynamics they're trying to.
Sir, I'm glad that you mentioned about India's role in the region, but we want to see India playing a positive role in the region. Unfortunately, we do see India playing a role, but it's a very negative role.
Very
sir.
negative role.
In fact, all the countries around India are unhappy, sir.
That is what Xi Jinping from the Beijing, that is what the message from Beijing and from Russia. It's going very clearly to India. They are not trying to spoil their relations with India. They are also trying to go for a big trade with India. The Russians are also trading with India. India is trading with America as well, with a huge amount of hardware, military hardware they are buying. They have choices in that. But they should also know that they are in this region also. They have got some responsibilities to play in this region as well. If they also start on thinking on that line, I think their stance towards Pakistan and the rest of the countries in this region, the overall regional prospect, which is seen as a very good thing, as a very good omen, which we want to see at least in our lives, that yes, we are also a region which is a much bigger and a stronger economically and otherwise also politically also from the West. And we have those resources and we have that potential.
And the examples are in front of us, sir. The United States of America or the European Union are clear examples of what cooperation can achieve. And I don't understand why the people in our region are unable to see that fact.
Yeah, because we have invaders here. And since the role of the invaders are, unless we cut the invaders away from us and we try to understand that, the earlier we understand, the better it would be for this region.
Absolutely, sir. So I think we're completely out of time, but thank you very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and as always, we like to say, please draw your own conclusions from what you've heard. We hope and pray that the Americans and the Afghan Taliban come to a truce, and we can see peace finally come back to Afghanistan. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.